They smiled kindly, the sort of smile that makes you feel safe. Their words were soft, measured, and calm. Every sentence carried the right tone, the right intention. There was nothing out of place, not a hint of anger, not a trace of doubt. It felt pure, almost too pure. And yet, beneath that calm surface, something felt uneasy. It was as if all that light was hiding something unseen. We often admire those who seem perfectly good, perfectly kind, untouched by any imperfection. We want to believe in their goodness because it gives us hope that maybe such purity is possible. We crave that sense of moral certainty. But Carl Jung warned us to be careful of such illusions. He said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." When someone presents only their light, they are not showing us the full picture of who they are. They are showing us a mask. This mask of goodness is not always built from deceit. Often it is built from fear. The fear of being judged. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being seen as flawed or weak. So people learn to wear the face of perfection. They speak gently, act selflessly, and avoid conflict. They become the person everyone admires, the person everyone trusts. But deep inside, the parts they hide begin to whisper. The unspoken anger, the jealousy, the frustration, they do not vanish. They wait in the dark. Jung understood this better than most. He saw that pretending to be pure does not make a person good. It makes them divided. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The mask may protect us from judgment, but it also blinds us to our own truth. Behind the calm face of goodness, there can be resentment, pride, or guilt that has never been faced. And when that shadow finally rises to the surface, it often does so in ways that hurt both the person and those around them. The tragedy of the mask of goodness is that it isolates. It separates a person from their humanity. They begin to perform kindness instead of feeling it. They do what is right not out of understanding, but out of fear of being seen as wrong. Over time, that kind of goodness becomes hollow. It turns into control. It demands that others also be pure, that they also hide their flaws. And so the mask spreads, not as kindness, but as expectation. When we look closely, we can see this pattern everywhere. People who work tirelessly to appear perfect, to speak without error, to live without contradiction. But life itself is contradiction. We can be both kind and angry, loving and afraid, strong and uncertain. To deny that truth is to deny what makes us real. Jung taught that a person becomes whole not by rejecting their flaws, but by integrating them. He believed that our imperfections hold meaning. They show us where we have room to grow, where our compassion begins. Jung's insight into this is gentle, yet powerful. He did not condemn those who wear the mask. He understood that it is a form of survival, a way of coping with the fear of rejection. But he also reminded us that healing begins when the mask starts to slip. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That is the moment when false goodness begins to fade and authenticity takes its place. So when you meet someone who seems impossibly pure, pause for a moment. Look beyond the shine. Remember that every light casts a shadow, and that the people who appear the most perfect are often those who are struggling hardest to hide their pain. The mask of goodness may look beautiful, but beneath it lies the deeper truth of what it means to be human, imperfect, complex, and real. There is a part of every person that stays hidden, even from themselves. It's not always dark in the way people imagine. It's simply the part of us that holds what we do not want to admit. Carl Jung called it the shadow. He said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." The shadow is not a monster. It is the truth we turn away from. It is made up of every feeling we have been told we should not feel. Every thought we tried to bury. Every impulse we judged as wrong. We all carry it. The child who learned to hide anger. The adult who pretends they never feel envy. The person who smiles when they want to scream. These are all pieces of the shadow. When we push them away, we believe we are becoming better people, but in truth we are only becoming less whole. The more we deny those feelings, the more power they gain in silence. What we resist does not disappear. It waits, and it grows. Imagine a person who has spent their entire life trying to be perfectly good. They avoid conflict. They say yes when they mean no. They apologize for things that are not their fault. On the surface, they seem gentle, kind, and harmless. But deep inside them, a quiet resentment begins to build. The anger they never spoke starts to twist into bitterness. One day, something small happens, a word, a mistake, a moment of pressure, and suddenly that hidden anger bursts out, sharp and cold. People around them are shocked. They say, "That's not like them." But it is. It's the shadow finally showing its face after years of being ignored. Jung believed this happens to all of us in some way. When we deny our darker emotions, we do not erase them. We only give them the chance to come out in distorted forms. He said, "What you resist persists." When we pretend that we are above our flaws, we start to lose touch with our real selves. We become divided. Half of us shines in the light of who we think we should be, while the other half is trapped in the dark, waiting to be seen. There is a quiet tragedy in this. Many people spend their entire lives trying to be only good, never realizing that goodness without honesty becomes fragile. It cannot bend or breathe. The person who refuses to see their shadow becomes haunted by it. It slips into their words, their judgments, their reactions. They begin to see their own hidden flaws reflected in others. They criticize harshly, not realizing that what they reject in others is the very thing they cannot face in themselves. The shadow we refuse to see holds everything we need to understand about our own humanity. It is where empathy is born. When we finally face our anger, we learn patience. When we acknowledge our envy, we learn gratitude. When we admit our fear, we find courage. Jung believed that integrating the shadow, not destroying it, is what allows us to become whole. He said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." To face the shadow takes courage. It asks us to sit with discomfort instead of hiding from it. It asks us to say, "Yes, this too is part of me." But when we do, something begins to heal. The tension between who we are and who we pretend to be starts to soften. We begin to live more honestly. The light we show the world becomes real because it is no longer built on denial. Carl Jung warned that one of the greatest dangers in human behavior is the illusion of moral purity. He saw how people often strive to appear good while quietly denying everything inside them that does not fit that image. He said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." It sounds simple, but most people are afraid to do it. To accept oneself completely means to admit the parts we have been told are unacceptable. It means facing anger, pride, selfishness, or jealousy without trying to disguise them. Many find that unbearable, so instead, they build an image of false goodness to hide behind. False goodness is not about kindness. It is about control. It creates a surface of perfection that must be constantly protected. The person begins to speak in the language of virtue, always appearing polite, selfless, and pure. But the more they try to hold that image, the more they must reject anything that threatens it. They deny their anger, so they become passive-aggressive. They deny their envy, so they gossip. They deny their pride, so they seek quiet ways to prove they are better than others. It becomes a game of appearances, not truth. Jung saw this as dangerous because what is denied within does not die. It turns outward. When people refuse to face their own flaws, they begin to see those flaws in everyone else. They project their shadow onto others, turning personal denial into judgment. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But instead of learning from irritation, the person who believes in their own purity uses it as proof that they are good and others are not. They divide the world into two kinds of people, the righteous and the wrong. The result is moral blindness. They cannot see that what they hate in others is a reflection of what they have not accepted in themselves. This is why Jung's warning about false goodness feels so urgent. When goodness becomes an act, it stops being good. It becomes an instrument of power. The person who believes they are pure feels justified in condemning others. They may even cause harm while convincing themselves they are helping. History, Jung observed, is full of people who committed cruelty in the name of virtue. But this does not happen only on large scales. It happens quietly in ordinary lives every time someone hides behind kindness to avoid accountability or uses morality to feel superior. False goodness also destroys intimacy and trust. When we wear the mask of purity, no one can truly know us. Others might admire us, but they cannot connect with us. The mask creates distance. It demands that we stay perfect, and perfection cannot love or be loved. Real connection comes from honesty, from showing who we are even when it is not flattering. The person who cannot admit their flaws may seem safe, but they are also unreachable. Jung believed that false goodness poisons the soul because it cuts us off from growth. As long as we maintain the illusion of purity, we cannot learn from our mistakes. We spend so much energy defending our image that we forget to be real. He said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it." Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. The more we condemn our own darkness, the more it controls us from behind the curtain. The danger of false goodness is that it looks beautiful on the outside. It earns praise, trust, and admiration. But beneath it, there is tension. A silent battle between the self that wants to be seen and the self that must be hidden. That battle cannot last forever. The mask always cracks. Sometimes it breaks in moments of anger, when the person who never loses their temper suddenly explodes. Sometimes it breaks in sadness, when years of denial collapse into exhaustion. Sometimes it breaks quietly, in a private realization that all the goodness they have shown has been more about fear than love. To protect ourselves from this danger, we must learn to hold both our light and our darkness with equal honesty. We must learn to say, "I am capable of both kindness and cruelty, of both generosity and selfishness." This kind of honesty does not make us impure. It makes us real. Jung showed us that the path to true goodness is not found in pretending to be perfect, but in accepting that we never will be. The person who can face their flaws without fear will never need to hide behind false virtue again. And that, Jung believed, is where genuine goodness begins. Carl Jung believed that the real journey of becoming whole begins when we stop hiding from ourselves. He knew that every person wears a mask to some degree, a version of themselves shaped by what they think the world wants to see. But beneath that mask lies something raw and unfiltered, the full truth of who we are. Facing ourselves honestly is the act of turning inward without judgment, without excuses, and without the need to look perfect. It is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Those words are both a warning and a gift. They remind us that as long as we refuse to look inward, we remain trapped in patterns we do not understand. We repeat the same mistakes, react the same way, and wonder why life feels heavy or confusing. Facing ourselves honestly does not mean condemning what we find. It means seeing it clearly and choosing not to run from it anymore. It starts quietly, often in a moment of stillness. Perhaps we notice that we have been quick to anger or slow to forgive. We realize that we speak kindly to others but harshly to ourselves. We recognize that our constant need to appear strong is really fear disguised as pride. These realizations can be uncomfortable, even painful. But Jung believed that this discomfort is sacred. It is the moment when honesty begins to dissolve illusion. It is the point where healing starts. He taught that our task is not to fix ourselves, but to understand ourselves. When we face our flaws, we begin to see that they are not enemies. Our impatience might hide a deep longing to be heard. Our jealousy might point to a forgotten dream. Our fear might be trying to protect us from being hurt again. Each emotion, no matter how unpleasant, has something to teach us if we are willing to listen. Jung said, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." To face ourselves honestly means giving up the illusion of perfection. It means admitting that we are both capable of kindness and cruelty, wisdom and ignorance, love and resentment. It takes courage to say, "Yes, this is me too." But that courage frees us. The moment we stop pretending to be pure, we become real. Realness is where compassion begins. When we see our own flaws clearly, we stop judging others for theirs. We begin to understand that everyone carries something they are afraid to face. Jung never promised that self-awareness would be easy. He knew that it often comes with sadness, because we have to let go of the version of ourselves we wanted to be. But he also knew that what comes after that sadness is strength. Once we have looked into our own depths and survived, the world can no longer control us with shame. We learn to stand quietly and say, "I am imperfect, and I am still worthy." That kind of peace cannot be taken away. Facing ourselves honestly also means learning to forgive the parts of us that made mistakes. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we carry it. Jung believed that wholeness is born from reconciliation, the coming together of light and shadow, love and regret, strength and weakness. When we accept all parts of ourselves, we no longer have to split into fragments of who we think we should be. We become one complete person. When we face ourselves honestly, we discover that the darkness inside us is not bottomless. It is a space of depth, not destruction. It is where we find humility, empathy, and balance. The person who has faced their own shadow does not need to hide behind false purity, because they understand what it means to be human. They can hold light and dark together without shame. They become calm, steady, and kind, not because they are flawless, but because they have stopped pretending to be. This is what Jung wanted for all of us, not a life of perfection, but a life of truth. When we have the courage to face ourselves, we begin to live in harmony with who we really are. And in that honesty, we find a quiet kind of freedom, a peace that no mask of goodness can ever provide. Carl Jung believed that the pursuit of purity is a misunderstanding of what it means to be truly human. Purity seeks perfection. It wants to be untouchable, spotless, above all flaws. But life does not move in straight lines, and the human heart is not made of clean divisions. It is a landscape of contradictions, of love and fear, compassion and resentment, courage and doubt. To chase purity is to deny half of what we are. Jung called us to something much deeper. He called it wholeness. He said, "I would rather be whole than good." At first, those words sound strange. Why would anyone choose to be whole instead of good? But Jung understood that goodness built on denial is fragile. It breaks under pressure. Wholeness, on the other hand, can hold everything: the beauty and the darkness, the peace and the pain. It is grounded in truth, not image. When we strive for purity, we divide the world into light and shadow, right and wrong, pure and impure. We begin to judge not only others but ourselves through that narrow lens. The result is exhaustion and guilt, because no one can live without making mistakes. Wholeness invites us to see beyond that struggle. It asks us to recognize that our contradictions are not failures, but signs of life. The anger that flares within us is not proof of corruption, but a signal that something matters deeply. The sadness we feel is not weakness, but evidence of our capacity to care. When we stop chasing purity, we start learning from what we feel. We begin to live in a fuller, more compassionate way. Jung believed that every person carries an inner conflict between who they are and who they wish to be. The goal is not to erase that conflict, but to bring balance to it. He wrote, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. When we accept ourselves, we stop dividing the world into saints and sinners, heroes and villains. We begin to see that every person is a mix of both. That realization softens the heart. It makes us humble and forgiving. Purity demands that we cut away what is unpleasant, but wholeness asks us to listen. It invites us to bring our fear, anger, pride, and shame into awareness, not to celebrate them, but to understand them. In that understanding, they begin to lose their power. The energy we once used to hide becomes the energy we use to grow. When we embrace wholeness, we stop running from what hurts us, and instead, we learn from it. Jung said, "The shadow is not a moral problem. It is a natural phenomenon. It becomes a moral problem only when we refuse to face it." There is a deep peace that comes with this way of living. When you stop trying to be pure, you stop fearing your own reflection. You no longer have to perform goodness. You simply live it. The person who knows their shadow no longer needs to prove their virtue. They understand that true goodness comes from self-awareness, not from denial. They can forgive others more easily because they have already learned to forgive themselves. Imagine a life where you no longer need to prove your goodness, where mistakes are not reasons for shame, but opportunities for understanding. Imagine meeting others not with judgment, but with recognition, knowing that they too are learning to hold their light and their darkness together. That is the life of wholeness. It is not spotless, but it is genuine. It is not perfect, but it is alive.